Back to tonight's politics panel. Still with me, Hughey Newsome, Mike Malloy, and Jennifer Kerns. Let's get back to it. Gerrymandering. On Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court heard a challenge from Republican state officials in Arizona who want to scrap that state's redistricting commission. It was created in 2000 after a successful ballot measure campaign. The Arizona Commission is an independent, bipartisan body that protects against partisan gerrymandering, frankly, by either party. In other words, it's a Republican's worst nightmare, and some would say a Democrat's if they ever get power in Arizona. So, you know, Arizona Republicans say that this is about the Constitution. We got to take this to the Supreme Court. The Constitution says state legislatures get to decide how and when and all this kind of thing. And yet there's a lot of precedent for the word legislature in those states whose constitutions allow citizen ballot initiatives to include the citizens of the state. Jennifer, you're making noises like you.
This is quite interesting, given that I come from California, where we were kind of the birthplace of this gerrymandering. I think the case here in Arizona
is the anti-gerrymandering, because California has a very successful nonpartisan commission now that has redrawn all the districts to
I wouldn't agree with that, but not surprising that we disagree there. Look, the Arizona case is really interesting because it does, as you said, really hinge on what the Supreme Court is going to determine is the definition of the word legislature. The Republicans are saying no, legislature is a legislature. It's the elected body that has, you know, the power to write and approve laws in the state capitol there. But Democrats are coming in saying, well, a legislative body could be a commission that's been appointed, whether it's bipartisan or partisan, whatever. So that'll be interesting to see where the Supreme Court comes down on.
Actually, I think that what they're saying is that the argument is that because this was done by ballot initiative, that's not a legislative action. So the argument is that the legislature is the citizens of the state. And I think that that's, I mean, the first three words of the Constitution are "we the people."
Well, it's
interesting. Is that not completely consistent?
Well, it's interesting. It's not so much about the ballot initiative. See, the legislature has the duty to write laws, including the gerrymandering, redistricting, as they refer to it. There's two people that can either approve or disapprove of that. The governor can shoot it down, as can the voters through ballot initiatives. So I don't think this will be a shooting down of referendums, you know, voter ID, things of that nature, although Democrats would probably like for it to be. I think it really is more about what the meaning of the word a legislative body is.
Mike, isn't it time to amp this up even further and say, hey, let's just do away with gerrymandering? It's been 150-year, 200-year pox on our country.
You know, we live in a digital age now. Gerrymandering, and I hate that word, gerrymandering is not about governing. It's about political advantage. It doesn't make any difference who does it, Democrat or Republican. We live in a digital age. Why not take the population of a state, break it into whatever categories you want to break it into, feed it into a computer program, an algorithm that will spit back out a fair representation of all the people in that state, whether they're Democrat, Independent, Republican, conservative, liberal. We've got this technology. We're using, what, 18th century, or when would the guy who came up with the word gerrymander, his name was Jerry, and salamander.
It was Eldridge Gerry.
I knew you would know.
Yeah, he was congressman from Massachusetts. He was one of the signers of either the Declaration or the Constitution.
That's 18th century stuff. Yeah. We are in the 21st century. Why are we still allowing Democrat or Republican, I'm nonpartisan on this one, Democrat or Republican to do this?
Yeah. But let's be pragmatic. We know that the reason that there is gerrymandering today is to leave incumbents in power. So those that are in power, either indirectly because they have relationships with those in the state political power parties, or at the federal level, are not going to allow that to happen. And it allows certain incumbents to stay in power. So what you have to do, if you can get the people themselves to be aware and educated on this issue, this is a very important issue, then maybe you get enough of a critical mass to push against it.
I'm with you. I think if you were to ask 100 Americans what is gerrymandering, maybe 6 could tell you actually what it is.
Well, the other thing, too, I think as long as we have this system, if that's what you want to call it, in place, it's going to continue to drive down voter participation.
I agree.
Because people understand, well, why should I go vote in District X? Because I know that the way it's stacked, that my vote really is not going to mean anything.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Meanwhile, today Mike and I were doing our radio shows from Radio Row, literally across the street from the U.S. Supreme Court, because tomorrow and you'll be back there tomorrow, I believe.
Yeah.
I'll be taking calls in by ISDN from there tomorrow, because literally tomorrow the Supreme Court is going to hear this challenge to Obamacare, King v. Burwell, and what's really startling about this, according to the American Public Health Association, almost 9,800 people could die if the Supreme Court sides with the plaintiffs in King v. Burwell. You know, I think if even one life has been saved, this was a good law. But 10,000 a year? And is the Supreme Court really willing to do this?
The point you made, Tom, about what have the conservatives done in this country to move the country forward, to move everybody forward, and I agree with you, nothing. Why the Affordable Care Act, and I'm not totally in favor of it, I would prefer single payer, but we have the Affordable Care Act. Listening to all those people that I talked to today, just like you did, some of the stories very personal about how the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, has literally saved their lives, or literally kept their family together, or literally kept them out of bankruptcy court. Why there is any action against ACA at all, I do not understand. It is not socialist. It is a private enterprise. It was turning over to the insurance industry how many millions of new customers? 43 million new customers potential.
And it was first proposed in 1971 by Richard Nixon.
By the Heritage Foundation. It's a Republican idea.
Yeah, there you go. So Jennifer, 10,000 people dying. I mean, is this really the outcome that is the Republican Party, if in King v. Burwell the Supreme Court sides with the conservatives who are saying take down Obamacare, is the Republican Party going to find itself in the position of the proverbial dog that finally got the bumper?
No, you know, I think this notion that the Republican Party is still the party of no is way overblown. The Republicans right now in Congress are very close, I'm told, to coming up with an alternative to Obamacare. Now, point of fact here, what has the GOP done for this country? We abolished slavery.
No, that was not conservatives. That was the Republican Party, which was a
we did the 1960s civil rights movement. We produced people like Martin Luther King.
Liberals did that.
And tear down that wall. We liberated millions of people.
Let me clean this up a little, if I may, okay? My father was a conservative. My dad and I used to, every Sunday, we would sit and watch William F. Buckley. I read Buckley's books. I was just totally into... William F. Buckley famously said, a conservative is a man who stands athwart or astride the arc of history with his hand out shouting, no. I think that's a reasonable description, number one, and I think it's an important thing in our society. Conservatives are needed to balance liberals. Yes. Liberals are like, hey, let's move forward, let's move forward. Conservatives are going, oh, let's think about this, let's think about this. That doesn't make it inherently bad.
No.
But these guys are not conservatives, they're reactionaries. They're saying, we want to tear down the established order. Conservatives never say we want to tear down the established order. They say we want to maintain the established order.
They're radical conservatives. I would...
They're not really conservatives, they're reactionaries.
By definition, I think you have a good argument. But I will say this, it's kind of a catch-22, right? Because a conservative would argue that government getting out of the way of the people, allowing the people, like take for instance the .com boom, for instance, or any any industrial revolution or any type of advancement that's driven by the private sector at some level. One would argue that was conservatism, because it is saying that government isn't going to drive change. The people are going to drive change. Individuals are going to drive change. And entrepreneurship is going to drive change.
Well, and keep in mind what King v. Burwell is tomorrow at the U.S. Supreme Court. It truly is a case about the jurisdiction of insurance companies. And it's simply saying that they want PPACA, which is Obamacare, to be subject to all the other rules of other insurance companies. I was the chief spokesperson for the California Insurance Commissioner that regulated the Department of Insurance. And there are 50 insurance commissioners across the U.S. because insurance products don't get to pass state lines. So that's really the core of the case tomorrow at the Supreme Court. It'll be interesting to see how the court comes down that.
Yeah, that's a new one to me.
Yeah, I've heard it's just about the four words, state exchanges.
Right.
Yeah, no, the real problem is...
So you're saying that what they're trying to do with the health insurance market is the same thing that happened during the Nixon administration with the credit card market, which is, you say, because it used to be every state, banks in every state had to issue their own credit cards, and they were under the purview of the banking commissioner for the state, just like with the insurance.
Yeah.
So and so when Nixon changed the rules, South Dakota or North Dakota, I forget which one, it's on every credit card in every one of our pockets, said, we've got the loosest, laxest rules. We'll let the credit card companies screw people however they want, get away with anything they want, and all the credit card companies move to that one state. You're saying that the new agenda is to do that with health insurance? We're going to end up with one state with lousy health insurance standards, and everybody's going to
not at all.
Domicile themselves?
I'm saying what the opponents of Obamacare are saying is, gosh, in each state you do have a jurisdiction set up to where, you know, Blue Cross of California can operate only in California. Anthem of California can only operate in California.
Sort of.
Sort of.
Sort of.
But
I mean, I get my insurance through a New York company because but it's a, you know.
True. But what they're saying is that Obamacare is now coming in and is a federal agent that wants to tell states what to do. You have 36 states now that have refused to put in state health care exchanges. Obamacare is coming in and saying, well, we're going to do that as the federal government. The case tomorrow is truly about states' rights and jurisdictions, and it's an interesting, complex thing, but it'll be interesting to see how the court comes down on it.
I think we can all agree on that last comment. It's going to be very interesting. Yeah, okay. We just have a minute left. I'm just curious, anybody's thoughts on right to work in Wisconsin, these right to work laws?
Wisconsin is becoming I think the laughing stock because of Scott Walker of the 50 states, and I'm from Georgia, so it takes a lot of chutzpah for me to say that. But every time Scott Walker opens his mouth, I expect bats to fly out. I have never seen a guy like this before, who first of all is a liar. Secondly, the right to work, which is, it's not a right to work. It's a right to work for the least amount of money that some corporation wants to pay you. It has nothing to do with a right to work.
Salaries and right to work, household income in right to work states is on average $6,000 a year less. Yeah. And individual incomes in right to work for less states is on average $5,000 less.
Well, I want that right. I want the right to work. I want the right to work for the lowest possible amount that somebody can pay me.
The truth is, right to work states have lower unemployment rates. The worst income inequality is not to have a job. The unions are putting people out of jobs.
At worst wages. Okay, all right. Jennifer gets the last word. Hughey Newsome, Mike Malloy, and Jennifer Kerns, thank you all for being with me tonight.
Thank you.